1. The mask we wear. Imagine spending your whole life performing for an audience you never chose. You wake up, get dressed, speak, work, and move through the world with a subtle tension inside an invisible weight pressing on your shoulders. You tell yourself it's normal. You tell yourself it's just how life is. But beneath that performance lies a quiet, persistent question: who am I really doing this for? From childhood, we are taught how to behave, what to value, and who we should become. We're praised when we meet expectations and corrected when we don't. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, we begin to trade pieces of ourselves for approval. We smile when we're sad. We stay quiet when we long to speak. We conform when our soul aches to rebel. At first, it feels like a small compromise. But over time, those compromises become the mask we wear. We forget who we are beneath it. Michel de Montaigne, writing over 400 years ago, saw this performance for what it was: a subtle form of self-abandonment. He questioned why we devote so much of our lives to impressing others, to living by rules we never agreed to chasing ideals we don't truly believe in. He wondered what might happen if we stopped. What if we no longer needed to be liked by everyone? What if we didn't shape our identity around applause? What if, instead of perfecting the mask, we gently set it down? This isn't about becoming reckless or detached from reality. It's about realizing that caring too much, especially about things that don't reflect our truth, is not noble. It's exhausting. And it's a distraction. Montaigne understood that most people aren't suffering because life is hard. They're suffering because they're trying to survive as someone they're not. And the moment we begin to question that performance, the moment we whisper, maybe I don't need to play this role anymore, something begins to shift. That shift is not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet, like the sound of a lock clicking open. It's the beginning of coming home to yourself. But as we begin to step away from the performance, we're forced to confront something even deeper: the invisible prison of expectations we've carried for far too long. 2. The prison of expectation. But as we begin to step away from the performance, we're forced to confront something even deeper: the invisible prison of expectations we've carried for far too long. These expectations are subtle, seductive, and often inherited. They come from parents, teachers, culture, media, and social norms. And while they may appear as guidance, they often function as cages. You must succeed, but not fail. Be kind, but not weak. Stand out, but never make others uncomfortable. And as we internalize these contradictory demands, our sense of self becomes fractured. We begin to live in reaction, not intention. Montaigne recognized that most people are not truly living. They are performing scripts they didn't write, in a play they never auditioned for, on a stage they cannot leave. And the worst part? Many don't even realize it. They've been so deeply conditioned to equate their worth with external validation that questioning it feels like betrayal. But what if we turned that betrayal into liberation? What if we allowed ourselves to examine each expectation not with anger, but with honesty? Do I actually want this? Or was I taught to want it? Is this goal truly mine? Or am I chasing it to be seen as successful? These are not small questions. They are revolutionary. Because when you start to dismantle the structure of inherited pressure, you begin to glimpse who you were before the world told you who to be. And that glimpse is powerful. It doesn't arrive with certainty. It arrives with curiosity, a quiet sense that maybe there's another way to live, one that doesn't require constant self-editing or apologizing for your truth. Montaigne believed that the pursuit of peace begins with letting go of borrowed expectations. He saw clearly that perfection is an illusion and that striving to meet arbitrary standards only deepens our suffering. We don't need more pressure. We need more permission. Permission to be flawed, to be uncertain, to be evolving, to be human. And the moment we grant ourselves that permission, the prison begins to dissolve. Not because the world changes, but because we stop measuring our value by its impossible standards. And in that quiet undoing, something unexpected happens. We begin to reclaim the one thing that had been missing all along: our power to choose for ourselves. But that reclamation requires a brave step forward, one that challenges everything we've been taught about what it means to let go. 3. The truth about letting go. But that reclamation requires a brave step forward, one that challenges everything we've been taught about what it means to let go. For most people, the idea of letting go feels like giving up. We associate detachment with indifference, laziness, or emotional withdrawal. We fear that if we stop caring, we'll lose our drive, our passion, our edge. But Montaigne invites us to see things differently. To him, letting go was not surrendering to apathy, it was returning to truth. It was shedding the layers of noise that cloud our vision. It was removing the weight of unnecessary burdens so we could walk freely again. In his view, detachment is not an exit from life, it's an entrance. An entrance into a deeper kind of presence, one that is not distorted by the constant need for validation. Imagine how much energy we spend trying to manage impressions, overthink decisions, rehearse conversations that never happen, and measure ourselves against impossible standards. Now imagine what might become possible if that energy were released. What would you create? How would you speak? Who might you become? Letting go is not a loss, it's a realignment. It's choosing to place your attention where it matters most, rather than scattering it in 1,000 directions trying to meet 1,000 expectations. Montaigne believed that the person who detaches from the need to prove themselves becomes not weaker, but stronger. Because their strength is not borrowed, it's embodied. They no longer need applause to feel valid. They no longer fear failure because failure is no longer tied to identity. And they no longer overreact to rejection because they've stopped outsourcing their worth to external opinions. That kind of clarity can feel unfamiliar, even disorienting at first, especially in a world that worships busyness, image, and hustle. But it is the ground where peace begins to grow. And from that peace comes a paradox that Montaigne understood long before modern psychology confirmed it. The less you care about controlling outcomes, the more naturally things begin to align. Not because you've mastered the world, but because you've stopped resisting it. And when resistance ends, flow begins. That flow is not chaotic, it's intelligent. It knows where to take you if you trust it. And the first sign that you're entering it is simple: you feel lighter. But this lightness is not a mood, it's a shift in being. And it brings with it a kind of quiet power that cannot be faked, only found. A power that begins, always, with a question few are brave enough to ask: what if I didn't need to control this? 4. The paradox of power. What if I didn't need to control this? That single question unlocks a paradox at the heart of Montaigne's philosophy, a paradox that defies conventional logic but reveals a deeper truth. The less you try to prove your power, the more powerful you become. It seems counterintuitive. After all, we're taught that confidence is built through accomplishment, that strength must be displayed, that success is earned through constant striving. But Montaigne saw through the illusion. He understood that the people who truly radiate confidence are not the ones trying to convince you of their worth. They are the ones who no longer feel the need to. Their presence doesn't demand attention, it invites it. Their calm is not performative, it's rooted. And their power doesn't come from domination, it comes from detachment. The paradox is this: the moment you stop seeking approval, people begin to respect you more. The moment you stop trying to be liked by everyone, your authenticity becomes magnetic. The moment you stop obsessing over outcomes, opportunities seem to arise with less resistance. Why? Because when you are no longer entangled in the need to control perception, you become fully available to the moment you're in. And that presence, unfiltered, relaxed, and real, is incredibly rare. In a world addicted to image, someone who simply is becomes unforgettable. Montaigne believed that the truly wise don't strive to appear wise. They allow themselves to be human, flawed, and unfinished. They are not consumed with impressing others, and in that detachment, they become more impressive than those who try. This is not a rejection of effort or ambition. It's a redirection. It's shifting your focus away from trying to be something for someone else and toward becoming fully yourself. And when your energy is no longer scattered in the pursuit of external validation, it deepens, concentrates, sharpens. You move with purpose, not performance. You speak with clarity, not overcompensation. You live with an ease that cannot be manufactured. And that ease is magnetic not because it's loud, but because it's rare. The paradox of power is that real influence comes not from needing others to agree with you, but from being so aligned with your own truth that agreement becomes irrelevant. And ironically, it's that very irrelevance that draws people in. Because people are not inspired by perfection, they're inspired by presence. And presence only arises when we are no longer imprisoned by the need to control. But there's still a deeper force at play here, one that turns quiet self-acceptance into something unshakable. And it begins with remembering the one thing we've been taught to hide, our imperfection. 5. Authenticity is magnetic. And it begins with remembering the one thing we've been taught to hide, our imperfection. In a culture obsessed with polished images, curated identities, and flawless performances, Montaigne dared to suggest something radical: that imperfection is not a flaw in the design, but the essence of what makes us human. He believed that when we embrace our flaws rather than conceal them, we stop living in fear. We stop wasting our energy on appearances. And that release, we discover something unexpected. People are drawn to us not despite our imperfections, but because of them. Authenticity is magnetic. It bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to the soul. You can feel it when someone is being real, not polished, not packaged, just real. There's a quiet courage in someone who no longer hides, a quiet clarity in someone who doesn't explain themselves away, and a quiet invitation in someone who says, simply by existing, this is who I am, and I'm okay with it. That kind of authenticity can't be taught, it has to be remembered. It's what remains when the mask is dropped, when the script is forgotten. Montaigne didn't believe in striving to be something more. He believed in becoming more of what you already are beneath the conditioning, the comparison, and the constant pressure to perform. And when you begin to live from that place, something remarkable happens. Your relationships shift. Conversations deepen. Decisions become easier. You stop asking, "What should I do to be liked?" and start asking, "What feels true to me right now?" That shift in questioning changes everything. Because when your actions are aligned with your truth, you no longer need constant reassurance. You no longer seek applause to confirm your direction. You simply move, speak, and choose from a place of internal knowing. And others feel it. They may not understand it, but they respect it. They may not always agree with it, but they're drawn to it. Because authenticity is rare. Not because people are incapable of it, but because they're afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of failure. Afraid that who they are is not enough. Montaigne understood this fear, but he also knew that the cure was never in adding more layers. It was in removing them. And once you remove enough layers, you begin to sense something beneath all the noise, a kind of stillness, a kind of clarity, a kind of peace. And from that place, you begin to ask a different kind of question, not about who you should be, but about what's been weighing you down. And that question leads us into the heart of one of Montaigne's most powerful insights, the illusion of control. 6. The myth of control. And that question leads us into the heart of one of Montaigne's most powerful insights, the illusion of control. We like to believe that if we plan carefully enough, work hard enough, and worry intensely enough, we can prevent chaos. We tell ourselves that control is the path to safety, that if we just tighten our grip, life will stay in line. But Montaigne knew better. He saw clearly that life is not a machine, it's a mystery. And the more we try to force it into predictable shapes, the more it resists. Life doesn't ask for our management, it asks for our presence. The problem is not that we want stability, it's that we confuse stability with certainty. And in that confusion, we begin to chase the impossible. We try to control how people see us, how they feel about us, how the future unfolds, how the past is remembered. And all the while, we exhaust ourselves in a battle we were never meant to fight. Montaigne wrote about the exhaustion of constantly bracing against uncertainty. He observed how people become rigid, anxious, and deeply tired, not because life is always difficult, but because they're constantly trying to keep it from being unpredictable. But unpredictability is not the enemy. It's the nature of reality. The weather shifts. People change. Plans fail. And yet we cling. We cling to our identities, our routines, our tightly wound expectations of how things should go. And that clinging becomes suffering. The truth is, no amount of preparation can prevent life from being life. No amount of worry can rewrite tomorrow. And no amount of control can guarantee peace. Peace doesn't come from controlling the world. It comes from learning how to respond to it. From trusting that you are resilient enough to face whatever comes, not because you've anticipated every possibility, but because you've stopped needing to. Montaigne believed that by releasing the illusion of control, we create space, not chaos, but clarity. In that space, we find the freedom to move more lightly, speak more honestly, and live more fully. It's not that we stop caring, it's that we stop gripping. We let go of the need to script the moment, and in doing so, we discover something far more valuable than certainty. We discover fluidity, a life that flows rather than freezes. And once we taste that flow, we begin to sense that perhaps letting go isn't the end of responsibility. Perhaps it's the beginning of real wisdom. And that kind of wisdom leads to the very place Montaigne quietly pointed toward all along the inner freedom that comes through detachment. 7. Freedom through detachment. And that kind of wisdom leads to the very place Montaigne quietly pointed toward all along the inner freedom that comes through detachment. Detachment is often misunderstood. Sounds cold, distant, even uncaring. But Montaigne's vision of detachment was the opposite. To him, it wasn't a withdrawal from life. It was a full embrace of it without the need to control, predict, or possess. Detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop trying to own. It doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop letting your peace depend on the outcome. That subtle difference changes everything. Because when you are no longer ruled by the result, you become present for the process. You are no longer crushed by rejection, nor inflated by praise. You begin to live in alignment with your values, not with external rewards. Montaigne believed that when we detach from the constant craving for validation, we make room for something more enduring, self-trust. And from that trust, our voice grows stronger. Our steps become steadier. Our relationships shift from performance to presence. Imagine waking up in the morning not worrying about how the world will receive you, but simply asking, how can I be honest with myself today? That question alone can change the texture of a life. Because it points inward, not outward. It anchors you to something deeper than reputation or reaction. And that depth becomes your foundation. Detachment is not apathy. It is clarity. It is the ability to see what matters and what does not, to let go of the noise so you can hear your own thoughts again. It is the freedom to act without overthinking, to speak without rehearsing, to move through the world without constantly checking your reflection. And in that freedom, you begin to notice something remarkable. Life becomes lighter, not because circumstances change, but because you are no longer carrying the unnecessary weight of needing everything to go a certain way. You are no longer clinging to people to feel whole, or outcomes to feel worthy. You are simply living connected, engaged, and clear. Montaigne's detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the refinement of attention. It is caring deeply but wisely. And when you begin to live from that place, you become less reactive, more resilient, and infinitely more at peace. But perhaps the most surprising part of this shift is what happens next, not within you, but in how others begin to respond. 8. How real connection works. But perhaps the most surprising part of this shift is what happens next, not within you, but in how others begin to respond. When you stop needing others to validate your worth, they begin to experience you differently. There's a calm in your presence, a quiet steadiness that doesn't demand anything. And in that space, people feel safe. They don't feel judged, manipulated, or pulled into your insecurities. They feel free to be themselves. Montaigne observed that the more we try to control others through approval-seeking, through people-pleasing, through emotional dependency, the more disconnected we become. True connection is not born from need. It is born from freedom. And freedom begins with you. When you are no longer clinging to someone else to complete you, you stop projecting. You stop pressuring. You stop twisting yourself into shapes to avoid abandonment. Instead, you simply show up. Not to perform, not to impress, but to share space honestly, openly, and without attachment to the outcome. This kind of presence is rare because most people are not taught to relate this way. We are taught to chase, to control, to secure. We fear being alone, so we attach. We fear being unseen, so we exaggerate. We fear being rejected, so we overcompensate. But in doing so, we create walls where we long for bridges. Montaigne believed that the most genuine relationships arise not from trying to hold people close, but from giving them the space to come closer on their own. That when we stop trying to possess people, we begin to experience them, not as extensions of ourselves, but as mirrors, reflections of the depth we've cultivated within. And the more inner peace we carry, the more we invite others into their own. Think about it. Have you ever felt most drawn to someone who needed nothing from you? Who listened without judgment, loved without demand, and stayed without pressure? That's the energy of detachment. Not because they didn't care, but because they cared cleanly without entanglement. When we relate from that place, our connections deepen, not because we've said the right thing or acted the right way, but because we've made space for something real to emerge. Something unforced. Something honest. And that honesty heals. Montaigne's wisdom teaches us that the quality of our relationships will always reflect the quality of our relationship with ourselves. If we are restless inside, we will project restlessness outward. But if we are anchored, we offer anchoring to others. And in that offering, relationships no longer become places to hide from ourselves. They become sacred grounds for shared presence. But for that to happen, we must be willing to let go, not just of control, but of the belief that connection must be earned. Because the truth is, when you stop needing to be chosen, you begin to choose yourself. And that's where love finally begins to feel like freedom. 9. Choosing what to care about. And that's where love finally begins to feel like freedom. Because when you stop needing everything to matter, you begin to discover what truly does. In a world that pulls your attention in 1,000 directions, Montaigne offers a radical alternative not to care less, but to care selectively. He believed that most people are not suffering from a lack of care, but from misdirected care. We exhaust ourselves worrying about things that don't nourish us, reacting to people who don't truly see us, and chasing outcomes that never belonged to us in the first place. And all the while, the quiet, essential parts of life go unattended. Your peace, your truth, your purpose. These things don't shout. They wait. They wait for you to turn down the volume of the world and listen again. Montaigne didn't suggest we stop caring about life. He suggested we become artists of attention, to treat our care like a sacred currency and spend it only where it brings real return. Imagine what might shift if you asked yourself, before each worry, is this mine to carry? Before each impulse to react, does this matter in the long run? Before each decision, is this aligned with who I want to become? These questions don't make life easier, but they make it clearer. They act as filters, turning down the noise so the signal can be heard. And the signal is always the same. You are not here to prove yourself. You are here to live as yourself. When you forget that, everything feels like a battle. But when you remember it, even challenges feel like invitations. Invitations to deepen, to discern, to choose again. Montaigne believed that life is too brief and too precious to be wasted on performance. That the deepest kind of success is not found in applause, but in alignment. When your inner values match your outer actions, there's no more need to pretend. You can move through the world with quiet integrity, knowing that you are not driven by fear, but by truth, and that truth liberates you. Not all at once, but slowly. One no at a time. One choice at a time. One release at a time. Until one day, you realize you are no longer weighed down by the endless striving to be enough. You are already enough. And from that place, life becomes less about effort and more about presence, less about image and more about essence. And that essence, when honored fully, has the power to open the final door. The one Montaigne spent his life pointing toward even in the face of uncertainty. 10. When you let go, life flows. The one Montaigne spent his life pointing toward even in the face of uncertainty, because he understood what so many still resist, that life is not meant to be gripped tightly. It is meant to be met with openness. The final paradox of letting go is that it brings you closer, not further away. Closer to your truth, closer to others, closer to peace. When you stop measuring your worth by shifting standards, when you stop chasing illusions that were never yours to begin with, and when you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, something remarkable happens. Life begins to flow, not in a perfect line, but in a rhythm that feels honest. You begin to move not because you're being pushed by fear, but because you're being pulled by meaning. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop striving and start listening. And that listening opens doors to creativity, to clarity, to love, and to a kind of inner confidence that cannot be shaken by external storms. Montaigne's philosophy is not a technique. It's a return to self, a return to simplicity, a return to the parts of you that never needed fixing, only remembering. So ask yourself now, what are you still holding on to? What expectation, fear, or illusion is weighing you down? And what might become possible if you gently let it go? Not because you're giving up, but because you're coming home. And when you do, you'll begin to see what Montaigne saw centuries ago, that the moment you stop caring about the wrong things, the right things have a way of finding you. If this journey spoke to something deep within you, take a moment now to breathe with it. And when you're ready, help someone else hear it too. Share this message. Leave a comment with your own story. And if you'd like to walk further with us on this path of reflection and truth, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because sometimes, all it takes is one shift in perspective to change the course of a life.